Hey, my name is Brendan. I'm a digital ad strategist here at Artifex Digital. And today I want to talk about a really simple question, which is should you set targets based on sales numbers? Now, this is a common success metric that's used in businesses to measure growth over a change in time period, be it month over month or year over year. However, this can also lead to some poor decision making on a marketing level, and I want to illustrate why. The first concept that I want to talk about is the difference in contribution margin and how that changes in different phases of the sales process. So you start with the price of the good, then you have the cost of the goods sold or the inventory cost that pertains to that. And the difference between the two is the contribution margin on the sale of a single product. We call this the contribution margin one. You can take this a step further because there's going to be logistics, returns, fulfillment costs, all these additional factors to consider that go into providing the good or the service to the individual. And what's left afterwards is the contribution margin two. Now, the last step in this process, as we take it down that additional step, is the marketing costs, the amount that you're spending to promote the product, to acquire new customers, to make sales happen. And once you take that out, you're left with what's called contribution margin three. So as you can see in the step-by-step journey, you start with the price, which drives your sales. But at every step in the journey, you ultimately lose more and more of the dollars that you've earned from the sale, and that is no longer being kept in the business. Now, when we look at the difference between net sales and contribution margin three, we usually see this relation as it pertains to ad spend or overall marketing spend, which is the more that you spend, the more net sales you're going to make. But eventually, at a certain point in time, you start to lose contribution margin three. Now, why this happens is because the more that you spend, you're ultimately losing efficiency. The first sale that you make is going to be the easiest because it's the lowest hanging fruit. It's going to be the customer who is the most prepared to make a purchase. And for every dollar you spend after that, you're going after a customer who is less likely to purchase, and you have to pay more to get more exposure to ultimately sway them to buy the product. More specifically, we can do this in an illustrated table here. We're going to set an assumption that when your ad budget increases by $1,000, the cost per order increases by 50 cents. The product price remains the same. We're going to say that this is hypothetically a t-shirt company. They only sell t-shirts, $30. And the CM2 percentage, which is the amount that they keep in the business after the cost of goods sold and the costs of fulfillment, all of the logistics and everything that goes into providing the order to the customer, is 30%. So once they've done everything necessary to provide the product to the customer, they ultimately only keep $9 of that $30 price. And what we can see based off of this is as they increase the ad budget, starting at $1,000 all the way to $10,000. As I mentioned, the cost per order is going to increase by 50 cents for each $1,000 it's increasing by. The orders increase over time, the sales increase, but the CM2 also increases, but the CM3 is actually going to have this parabolic relationship with ad spend, which is it's going to keep increasing, and then at a certain point in time, that cost per order is going to increase such that you're ultimately losing money on additional sales. And so what we're ultimately looking for when we're trying to determine what is a healthy amount of ad spend is trying to maximize this CM3 value, which as we can see here, set the budget at $4,000, you're maximizing that CM3. You're not maximizing net sales, but you're maximizing CM3. And that's because you can continue to increase spend as much as possible to just continuously generate more sales. But ultimately, at some point, it is going to be costing the business money, and it's no longer going to be a profit generating activity. So when we start working with the client, ultimately our goal is to try and find this point in the graph, which is what is that amount of ad spend that you can sustain such that you're maximizing the CM3 to the business, and you're covering all of those operating expenses, overhead expenses, your rent, your software, your employees, all of those things are covered by the CM3 generated. Now, one thing that isn't taken as an absolute given is this relationship of cost per order to budget, because there are certain things that you can do to decrease that cost per order. This might be launching new ad creative that shows a different angle to the product. It could be a partnership with a creator on Instagram or a celebrity. Anything that gets that ad in front of new eyeballs and gives them a new reason to consider the product can bring that cost per order down and sustain higher ad budgets. So ultimately, as I said, our process begins with finding that peak in the CM3, but then comes the iteration phase of how can we develop new creatives, consider new angles, touch on new audiences in a convincing way, such that we're bringing that cost per order down and allowing ourselves to scale that ad spend to a new maximum point, continuing to provide sustainable, profitable growth to your business.